Oh man, in the ever-expanding files of politicians and bureaucrats hurt you, deflect blame, deny accountability, and then use your tax cash to give you a beneficent handout, the German finance minister, Christian Lindner, Saturday said he was in favor of some form of energy handout to citizens after his government's policies and attachment to the EU caused the problem in the first place, which ought to be a signal that mandate maniac politicians in the US can hear before it's too late. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV, and here's the story. Daniel Stewart reports for News 360, quote, German Finance Minister Christian Lindner on Saturday said he was in favor of setting aside a portion of the 200 billion euros in aid approved this week by the German government in order to cushion energy costs. Isn't that sweet? You know, as the legendary libertarian and economic advisor Harry Browne once said, government is good at one thing. It knows how to break your legs, hand you a crutch, and say, see, if it weren't for the government, you wouldn't be able to walk. The push for energy aid comes after decades of German government pander spending, domestic welfarism, and welfare for the debt-ridden European Union, all of which have sunk Germany and the German people who will have to pay the German bond obligations into a debt crisis of 2.3 trillion euros, which is roughly $2.6 trillion. And that represents 70% of the country's total gross domestic product. And by the way, they are experiencing year-to-year price increases due to inflation that have hit 10% as of September. Writes Stewart, quote, our efforts should be directed towards setting aside the 200 billion as far as possible, Lindner explained in statements published in Saturday's edition of the Rheinische Post newspaper, which offers clear-minded observers an opportunity to remember fundamental lessons in economics and ethics. And of course, it lets folks see that most people running governments not only never learn these lessons, they don't even acknowledge that the lessons are there. You know, I teach economics and philosophy students that showing respect for others and their property allows for division of labor, which allows for people to do what they do best, to become better at what they do and provide more for less effort over time. With their surplus, they will determine ranges for their diminishing marginal returns on further effort doing that particular thing. And then, rather than keeping the surplus, they'll trade with others for things those others make efficiently. And they will compete, they will learn, and they'll become even more efficient, maximizing the efficiency and living standards of the entire trading group. The entire system improves. For example, ancient people divided labor by seeing the stronger, faster folks go out and hunt, while older people and women stayed near the habitat, working on skins and spears and so on. Now, we might say to politicians, imagine if an egotistical maniac came around to tell the folks in those ancient tribes that to protect trees, even though there are prices attached to tree limbs, let's say, so that if they became more scarce, people would be incentivized to grow more trees and import more tree limbs from elsewhere. This maniac comes up and says that he will handle the spear work production and sale. He will only allow certain people to produce spears, and he will control the distribution of spears. Even the spears made and sold by far-off tribes would be blocked by this maniac. Perhaps they would be allowed, but it would be up to the maniac via his egomaniacal whim. And he would also take people's money to fund the management of his imposed tree limb saving system. Yes, finally imagine that the egomaniac also blocks one of the most efficient far-off spear makers, just decides. No spears coming in from that place. And of course the locals now have a dearth of spears and they're starving. Now, what's the best way to get people free to acquire more spears? Would that be handing them some tax money, which is actually taken from them or borrowed from future generations and will have to be paid off by their progeny and end up driving up the prices of spears even more? Would it be by imposing price controls on spears, which would stifle spear production? Or would the best economic and ethical option be freedom to let supply meet demand in a competing market that soon sees the suppliers work towards efficiency gains to lower prices and improve service and increase the number of spears? Thus far, the German government has smothered any real market for energy, just like the egomaniac would smother the spears. And until last month or so, the German government had embarked on dangerous policy paths, such as nationalizing, aka stealing, an energy company, which already had been regulated to death by the German government, such as blocking Russian energy, now a certainty due to the evident sabotage of Nord Stream 1 and 2, and shutting down half of the German nuclear plants. Now, at some future date, perhaps we can discuss the liabilities that nuclear plants pose for property rights and what would happen if such plants weren't in place via government corporate partnerships, but that's for a later date. But right now, while Secretary Linder clings to the foolishness of autocrats retaining control over the whole system, he at least does want to adjust that control to allow for a greater supply and fewer taxes laid on the sale of energy. There is that positive. Reports Stewart, quote, "The Liberal minister was also in favor of expanding the energy supply to lower market prices and keeping the 3 nuclear power plants still in operation connected to the grid, in addition to the reactivation of at least 2 more. Linder has also proposed developing new sources of gas supply, central control, and producing as little electricity as possible from gas. He has also called for a rapid expansion of renewable energies." And in those latter proposals, we see the dark face of hubris once again emerging. It's not his place to decide for others how they heat and cool their homes, how they cook or wash their clothes, or energize their stinking vehicles. It's the very mindset of central planning and the fear of letting people make their own valuations and spend their money freely with liberated suppliers that we're seeing here. It's the mindset that already has gotten Germany into a position where people are foraging for wood to burn as heat. None of this is necessary. It is entirely a result of political forces and the arrogance of people inhabiting the polis that they believe that they can and have a right to control the choices and lives of other people. We can see that the German so-called finance minister is trying to change this bad situation. But until people realize that the very concept of a government finance minister or anyone in government touching the market, that it is anathema to freedom of choice and market liberality, well, they will suffer needlessly for years to come. They gotta learn the lessons. Free market economics and ethics leave people alone, and markets function best because people can show their values. Just make sure that property rights are protected. And of course, government always invades property rights. So there's a bit of a problem from the start. Hey, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe. Remember, Rumble does not censor us. So if you're watching on Rumble, please share the videos from there. Make sure you subscribe and hit the plus button. Awesome, all set. YouTube, so far so good. Just make sure you are still subscribed. We'll see you in the comments section over there as well. And we'll see you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and MRCTV.org. That's MRCTV.org. While you're there, check out the MRC Store, the Media Research Center, in its 35th year. Score. I am on Gab at Gardner Goldsmith, and I am on Twitter at Gard Goldsmith. Thanks so much for watching, kindred spirits. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.